In the dark, we choose. The Valentine's Reset by Ty Bird. Consider subscribing for more original stories. Chapter 1. The Valentine Reset. Tom Bryan's thumbs moved on muscle memory. Left stick, strafe. Right stick, angle. Trigger, burst. The sound in his headset was clean and crisp, the kind of audio that made you forget your body existed. The basement was dim except for the glow of his monitor and the small lava lamp on the corner shelf that had been there since he was 15. The lamp's wax blobs rose and fell like slow, sleepy ghosts. On the screen, his squad cleared a hallway with perfect, practiced aggression. Tom wasn't supposed to be here. He was supposed to be on a base somewhere, sweating under a ruck, running drills until his legs felt like someone else's. He was supposed to be calling cadence, training, becoming the man the Army had squeezed him into. Instead, he sat on an old couch in his parents' basement, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, controller warm in his hands, and he felt like he'd slipped out of time. "Bryan, you there?" A voice crackled in his headset. Tom blinked hard like he'd forgotten how to be awake. "Yeah, I'm here. You sound like you're in a cave." "I am in a cave." His buddy laughed. "Man, I told you. Leave is a lie. They send you home so you can remember what you're missing." Tom smirked, eyes locked on the doorway on screen. "I'm missing nothing. I've got snacks. I've got heat. I've got Wi-Fi. I've got—" He paused because his squad's medic took a shot and fell. "I've got idiots," Tom finished, and he pushed forward in the hallway like he had something to prove. He was 23. He just graduated advanced training. The Army had made him faster, sharper, harder, but it hadn't made him settled. If anything, it had made him more aware of the space between who he was and who he was expected to be. Upstairs, the house creaked in the February wind. Outside, it was Valentine's Day. Tom didn't think about that until the game ended and his team started talking about dinner reservations and couples and how the reset tonight is going to be romantic as hell. Tom muted his mic and rolled his eyes. Valentine's Day had always been annoying. The whole world acted like love was a subscription you forgot to renew. Like if you didn't have someone by February 14th, you had failed at being human. And now the government was leaning into it. They've been talking about the Valentine Reset for weeks, officially called the National Power Grid Synchronization Initiative, which sounded like a brand new type of toothpaste. But the ads didn't talk like that. The ads were soft, warm, heavy on slow-motion smiles and candlelight. A day to reconnect. A night without distraction. Togetherness through simplicity. The spokesperson said it was a necessary cybersecurity measure to protect the power grid from foreign threats. They said it would be short, controlled. They said emergency services and hospitals would remain supported, that backups were in place, that everything would be fine. But they didn't sell it like a drill. They sold it like a holiday. They leaned into the idea that the world needed to unplug. That couples needed to look into each other's eyes instead of screens. Tom had watched one of the announcements 2 nights ago and heard the phrase, "Let Valentine's be a day of love and togetherness for every American." Now, sitting alone in the basement with a controller in his lap and the cheap Valentine's candy his mom had put in a bowl upstairs, it didn't feel funny. "Reset isn't romantic," Tom said into the headset. "It's a scheduled inconvenience." "Oh, come on, Bryan," his buddy said. "Some of us are trying to make it a vibe. My girl already got candles and stuff." "You got a girl," another voice cut in. "Of course you're defending it." Tom didn't. He didn't take the bait either. He'd had girlfriends. He dated. But between training and ambition and whatever else was lodged in his chest like an unspoken rule, relationships had always felt like trying to hold water in his hands. And the truth he would never say out loud was simple. He didn't want casual. He wanted something that stuck. He wanted something that didn't feel like a situationship held together by convenience. But wanting something and having it were 2 different wars. A thump sounded upstairs, footsteps crossing the kitchen. The house had a certain rhythm to it. His mother's gentle movements. The clink of a spoon. The soft hum of the dishwasher. The heavier steps. His father. Tom's stomach tightened automatically, the way it always did when his father moved through the house. His dad wasn't an angry man, not the way some dads were. He didn't shout. He didn't throw things. He didn't swing his authority around like a weapon. He was worse than that. He was controlled, and control was its own kind of gravity. Tom's father, Richard Bryan, was the type of man who watched the world like it owed him an apology. He'd been career military for most of Tom's childhood, meaning he was always either leaving, returning, or mentally still somewhere else. After retirement, he stepped into a life that made Tom's skin itch whenever he thought about it too hard. If anyone asked directly, Richard would say he worked in security acquisition. His father sold weapons. Not on a street corner. Not in a trunk. In clean meetings with clean men who wore suits and spoke in acronyms. He had money, real money, and the kind of paranoia that wasn't random but trained. Their house looked normal. That was the point. Normal from the street. Quiet neighborhood. 2-car garage. Small backyard with a shed that always stayed locked. But Tom had grown up in a home where the locks were heavy and the curtains were thick, and his father always knew where the exits were. The basement door opened and light spilled down the stairs. Even in the dim, Richard Bryan looked like a man who hadn't truly relaxed in decades. Tom lifted the controller. Leave, remember? Richard stepped down a few stairs and paused like he didn't want to enter fully. Your mother wants you upstairs in a bit. She's making that little steak thing. His father didn't move. Didn't leave. Tom set the controller down, suddenly aware of the quiet. Richard's eyes flicked past him to the gaming setup. Monitor, console, router blinking on the shelf. Like he was cataloging the basement the way a man catalogs supplies. You'll be able to keep this going tonight, Richard said. Tom blinked. What? The reset, his father said like Tom was the one behind. Power goes down at midnight. But we keep our generator online. I wired it myself. Richard's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Because the world is going to be bored and restless, and bored people panic. You won't. That landed wrong. Not the words. The tone. Tom sat up straighter. It's a reset. For cybersecurity. Tom didn't like the way his father said they. Dad, Tom said slowly, it's all over the news. It's controlled. They've done smaller tests. Richard moved down one more stair, and in the glow from the monitor, Tom could see the lines in his face. Not age lines. Tension lines. The kind that didn't come from time, but from carrying the weight of what you knew. Tom, Richard said quietly, I need you to stay in the house tonight. Tom's chest tightened. I'm not a kid, Tom said. Tom's jaw flexed. What? Richard's silence stretched just a second too long. Then, because I said so. Richard hesitated barely. Internal network knows how to ride through. There are redundancies. Tom sat still. You sound like you've been planning this. Richard's expression hardened. Planning is what keeps you alive. Tom started to ask another question. Richard cut him off with a simple, sharp, stay in the house. Then he turned and walked back up the stairs. The basement door shut and the light vanished. Tom stared at the door long after it closed. The headset beeped. His friends were still talking, laughing, making plans. Tom didn't rejoin them. He unmuted and said, I'm gonna hop off. Mom's calling me. What? On Valentine's? Someone teased. You got a date with your steak? Something like that, Tom said, forcing a laugh. And then he disconnected. The basement suddenly felt colder. Tom sat there, staring at his screen, his mind running through the small things. His father's tone, the way he didn't come all the way down the stairs. The way he said stay in the house like it was a tactical instruction, not a father's request. Tom pushed off the couch and walked over to the small storage closet under the stairs. It was where his mom kept Christmas decorations and old board games, and, if Tom remembered right, his father kept things no one touched. He opened it. Boxes. A folded ladder. Dust. Nothing obvious. He closed it and stepped back. Maybe he was reading into it. Maybe his father was just being his father, paranoid, prepared, impossible. Upstairs, the smell of cooking pulled him up. The kitchen was warm. Lights bright. His mother moved between the stove and the counter like she had decided the world would still be normal if she insisted hard enough. Hey, baby, she said when Tom entered. She called him baby even at 23. It used to embarrass him. Now it felt like something sacred. You hungry? She asked. Always, Tom said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She smiled. Good. And look. She gestured at the table. There was a small Valentine's card sitting by his plate. Tom stared at it like it might bite him. His mother's smile softened. I know you think it's silly, but I wanted you to feel love today. Tom swallowed. Thanks, Mom. He picked up the card. It was simple, a heart on the front. Inside, his mother had written, "No matter how big you get, you will always be my boy. Happy Valentine's Day." Tom felt something tighten in his throat, and he hated it. Hated that he was the kind of man who could jump out of planes, but could still be undone by handwriting. He set the card down carefully. "I didn't say you were." Richard's gaze stayed locked on his. "But I'm asking you to treat tonight like you're still in training. You understand?" That answer made Tom's frustration spike, but it also made something else rise beneath it, instinct. The same instinct the Army had sharpened. The instinct that noticed when a man avoided the truth. Tom held his father's gaze. Richard's eyes flicked toward the stairs, toward the door, toward something above them Tom couldn't see. Then Richard said, almost casually, "Generators already set. Fuel's full. Internet should hold." "Internet," Tom repeated. His father sat at the far end of the table, eating with quiet focus. He barely spoke. When his mother tried to bring up the reset, Richard gave a short nod and said, "We'll be fine." Tom watched him. His father's phone sat beside his plate. It wasn't a normal phone. Tom didn't know how he knew, but he did. Something about the thickness, the way the screen didn't reflect light the same way. Like it wasn't meant for apps, but for information. At one point, Richard glanced at it, and his jaw tightened. Tom's mother didn't notice. Tom did. After dinner, Tom volunteered to do dishes just to keep his hands busy. His mother fussed with candles in the living room. "For later," she said, "so we can have our little togetherness." She rolled her eyes like she didn't fully believe it either. They sure know how to make everything a marketing campaign. Tom forced a smile. Richard was already in his office. The office door shut. Tom listened. He could hear movement, a drawer opening, closing, then footsteps. His father passed through the living room with a jacket on. Tom paused mid-dish. "Where you going?" Richard didn't look at him right away. "I need to check something in town." "At 11 at night?" Tom asked. Richard's eyes flicked to the window. Before the reset, Tom turned off the water. "Dad." Richard finally met his gaze. There was something in his eyes Tom had never seen. Not fear. Not exactly. More like regret. "Stay in the house," Richard said again, softer this time. Tom stepped forward. "What's going on?" Richard's jaw worked like he was chewing words he didn't want to swallow. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out something thin and black, about the size of a tablet, but heavier looking, built like it belonged in a military case. He held it out. Tom stared at it. "What is that?" Richard didn't answer directly. "Don't use it unless you have to." Tom's pulse picked up. "Use it for what?" Richard's eyes flicked toward Tom's mother, who was in the living room humming while she arranged candles. Then Richard leaned closer and lowered his voice. "If the lights go out and they don't come back, you will hear it," Richard said. Tom's mouth went dry. "Hear it. It'll alert you," Richard said. "When it's time." Tom didn't move. "Time for what?" Richard's voice cracked barely. A fissure in a man made of steel. "Time to open the facility." Tom's stomach dropped. "Facility?" Tom whispered. Richard's eyes held his. "You're trained. You're capable. And you're my son." "That's not an answer," Tom said, voice rising. Richard's hand tightened around the tablet before he pressed it into Tom's hands. It was cold, heavy. It felt like holding a door key to something you didn't want to enter. "You don't know what you think you know," Richard said quietly. Then he stepped back. "I left you a message on it," he continued. "If you have to use it, you'll understand." Tom's hands trembled slightly, and he hated that too. "You're leaving," Tom said. "I'm handling something," Richard corrected. Tom's eyes narrowed. "You're not coming back before midnight." Richard didn't answer. That was the answer. Tom's voice dropped. "Dad." Richard put a hand on Tom's shoulder. It was rare enough that Tom froze. "My whole life, I've made decisions for survival," Richard said. "Tonight, you're going to learn what that costs." Tom stared at him. His father's eyes were wet, just slightly. Then Richard stepped away, walked past the candles, past Tom's mother's forced normalcy, and out the front door. The cold air rushed in. Then the door shut. Tom's mother looked up from her candles. "He's just going to the store, right?" Tom swallowed and forced his face into something calm. "Yeah," he lied. His mother smiled, relieved. "Men, always last minute." Tom stood there holding the tablet, like it might explode. Outside, the neighborhood was still bright. Porch lights, street lamps, windows glowing with televisions and Valentine's dinners. Across the street, Sarah Mitchell's house had lights on too. Tom's eyes snagged on her front window. He could see movement behind the curtains. Sarah. Even from here, he felt the familiar irritant of her existence. They'd grown up together. Same sidewalk, same bus stop, same snow forts, same fights. Sarah Mitchell was sharp in the way some people were sharp, like they enjoyed being a little bit cruel if it meant they didn't have to be vulnerable. She'd never liked Tom much, and Tom had never liked that she could see through him. He watched her for a moment too long. Then she stepped closer to the window, and her gaze lifted directly to him, like she'd felt his eyes. Even through glass, her expression said, "What are you looking at?" Tom's face warmed. He turned away. He walked down into the basement and set the tablet on the old coffee table near his console, like it was just another device, just another piece of tech. He told himself his father was being dramatic. He told himself it was fine. He told himself it was just a reset. Midnight came closer in a slow crawl. At 11:47 p.m., Tom sat back on the couch with his controller again, forcing normal into his hands. The game loaded. The internet held barely. Upstairs, his mother lit candles early, laughing at herself, turning the living room into something soft and golden. At 11:58 p.m., the neighborhood still looked normal. At 11:59 p.m., Tom's screen stuttered. At 12 a.m., everything died. The monitor went black. The console powered down. The router's blinking lights went dark. The lava lamp went still. A silence fell, so sudden it felt like the entire world had inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Upstairs, Tom heard his mother gasp, then laugh nervously. "Okay, that's fine. That's what they said." Tom stood quickly, heart hammering. He ran up the basement stairs. The living room was candlelit, but only because his mother had lit them already. Every lamp was dead. The television was dead. The heating system's hum had vanished. Outside, through the curtains, the street was a tunnel of darkness. No porch lights, no street lamps, no glow from neighbors' windows. The whole neighborhood looked like someone had erased it. Tom's mother held a candle close and tried to smile. "See," she said, "togetherness." But her eyes were wide. Tom forced calm into his voice. "It'll come back," he said, though something inside him didn't believe it. A distant sound carried in from outside. Not a siren, not a car. A collective noise, like people opening doors, stepping outside, calling out to each other in confusion. Tom's mother hugged her arms. "Your father said the generator." Tom's mind snapped to the basement. He turned and ran back down. The basement was pitch black except for the faint moonlight through the small window. He moved by memory, hands out, feeling the wall, the couch, the table. The tablet sat where he'd left it. Cold. Silent. Tom exhaled shakily. Maybe his father had overreacted. Maybe this was just a reset. Then a sound. Soft at first. A low pulse. A vibration like a heartbeat inside a machine. Tom froze. The tablet began to glow. A thin blue light traced its edges, and the sound grew sharper, an alert tone designed to cut through silence. Tom's breath caught, because his father had said, "If the lights go out and they don't come back, you will hear it." Tom stared at the glowing device in his hands. And in the dead dark basement, on Valentine's Day, with the world above him suddenly silent and unknown, the tablet's screen lit up with one word: access. And beneath it, a message icon blinked, waiting. Tom swallowed hard. Then, above the hum of the tablet, he heard something else. A knock. Not downstairs. At the front door. 3 sharp strikes. Then a pause. Then another knock, urgent. Tom stood perfectly still. In the darkness, his training snapped awake. His grip tightened. His ears tuned. Another knock. And then a voice, muffled through the house, cutting through the new world's silence. "Tom." "Sarah." His pulse jumped. "Tom, open the door. Please." Tom didn't move, because the last time Sarah Mitchell had said please to him was. He couldn't remember. The tablet vibrated again in his hands. The message icon blinked harder, like it knew time mattered. Upstairs, his mother called down, voice shaking. Tom? Who is it? Tom stared at the glowing screen, then up toward the stairs, then toward the faint light under the basement door. Then the knock came again. Tom, Sarah called. I don't think this is a reset. Tom closed his eyes for 1 second, and when he opened them, the boy on leave was gone. Something else stood in his place. He moved toward the stairs. And Valentine's Day, sold to the nation as a night of love and togetherness, became the night the world went out. And the night everything between Tom Bryan and Sarah Mitchell began. Chapter 2. After the switch, Tom opened the door slowly. Not because he was afraid of Sarah, but because the world on the other side of that door felt suddenly unfamiliar, like stepping into a house you'd lived in your whole life and finding the furniture gone. Sarah stood on the porch in a heavy coat, her dark hair pulled into a messy knot. The porch light above her was dead, so she was lit only by the moon and the faint candle glow spilling from the living room behind Tom. Her face looked sharper in the low light, older somehow. Not softer like people always were in candlelight. Real. Hey, she said. That was it. No sarcasm. No edge. Just one word, stripped of everything else. Tom's mother stood frozen in the living room, candle in hand. Oh, Sarah, she said, relief and confusion tangling together. Sweetheart, are you okay? Sarah nodded quickly. Yeah. No. But yeah. I didn't know where else to go. Her eyes flicked at Tom. He felt that pull in his chest again, the one he'd never had words for. Not attraction, not dislike, recognition. Something in her saw something in him. They just never admitted it. Tom led her down into the basement, the tablet still in his hand like a weight he hadn't earned the right to carry. The generator hummed to life as he reached the bottom of the stairs, kicking on the emergency lights in the corner. The basement didn't return to normal. It returned to survival. One bulb, one outlet strip, one narrow tunnel of visibility. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You have power, she said. My dad planned for it, Tom replied automatically. She looked at him. Of course he did. The words weren't cruel. Just knowing. Tom set the tablet on the table. It pulsed once, then went still, like it had done its job by waking him up. Sarah noticed it immediately. What's that, bulb? And for the first time in their lives, there was nowhere else to go. Tom shook his head. I don't know. Yet. They stood there for a moment. The world above them dark, the world below them lit by one lonely they found out how bad it was within an hour. The radios came first. Tom's father had left one behind in the office upstairs, the kind that didn't rely on modern networks. Just old signals, bouncing off what still existed. Static, then voices. Not clear, not calm. Grid failure, hospitals switching to backup, communication down across multiple states. This is not a drill. Tom stood in the doorway of his father's office, the radio clenched in his hands. His mother sat on the couch behind him, wrapped in a blanket she didn't seem to feel. Sarah leaned against the wall near the stairs, arms crossed, eyes sharp and unblinking. This isn't a reset, Sarah said quietly. Tom didn't answer. He didn't need to. By the time the radio fell back into static, the truth had already settled in his bones. This wasn't inconvenience. This was collapse. The first night passed in fragments. Sirens in the distance that faded into nothing. Shouts from neighbors outside. A car engine screaming and then dying. The house felt like an island in a dark sea. Tom barely slept. He kept hearing his father's voice in his head. If the lights go out and they don't come back. The tablet sat on the table, silent but heavy with promise. He didn't touch it yet. He wasn't ready to hear what his father had left him. Not while his mother was still pretending this was temporary. Around 3 a.m, Tom found Sarah sitting on the stairs, staring up at the black square of the basement window. You don't sleep much, he said. She didn't look at him. I sleep when things make sense. He sat on a step below her, close enough to feel her warmth, far enough not to touch. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, just new. My mom freaked out, she said finally, started crying. Thought the world was ending. Tom snorted softly. She might not be wrong. Sarah's lips curved slightly. You always had a talent for optimism. He glanced at her. You always had a talent for being annoying. She looked at him, then really looked. And for the first time in their lives, neither of them smiled after an insult. "We're not kids anymore, Tom," she said. "We don't have to keep pretending we hate each other." Tom's throat tightened. "I don't hate you." She nodded. "I know. That's what scared me growing up." The words hung between them like a door neither had known how to open. Not while Sarah was sitting in his basement, like she'd been meant to be there all along. They took turns keeping watch, not because they had enemies, but because it felt wrong to let the darkness go unobserved. Morning came without sunrise. Just a slow shift from black to gray. The world outside looked stunned. No engines, no screens, no distant hum of civilization. Just people standing in driveways, holding phones that no longer mattered. Sarah sat at the table, holding a mug like it was a lifeline. "You didn't have to let me stay," she said to Tom's mom. Nora Bryan smiled gently. "Honey, nobody leaves my house alone on a day like this." Sarah swallowed. Tom watched her from across the table, noticing things he'd never noticed before. The way she listened more than she spoke. The way her tough exterior cracked when she thought no one was watching. The way she held herself like someone who'd learned to rely on nobody, but wanted to stop. After breakfast, Tom finally picked up the tablet. Sarah noticed immediately. His mother didn't. He nodded toward the basement. Sarah followed. Tom's mother made coffee on a small camp stove his father had installed in the kitchen years ago just in case. The smell alone lifted something in the house, like proof that routine could still exist. The tablet lit as soon as Tom touched it. Not with alarm this time, with recognition. A simple interface appeared, military clean. No fluff, no decoration. Just one option. Play message. Tom's finger hovered. Sarah stepped closer. "You don't have to." "I do," Tom said. He pressed it. His father's face appeared on the screen. Not in uniform, not in a suit. Just Richard Bryan, sitting somewhere dimly lit, eyes tired, shoulders heavy. "Tom," the recording began. "If you're seeing this, then the grid went down the way we feared." Tom's breath hitched. Sarah glanced at Tom, then back at the screen. "I was part of a contingency program," Richard said. "A failsafe. The idea was simple. If our infrastructure was ever compromised beyond control, we would reset it to protect it." Tom whispered, "Reset." Richard's eyes closed briefly. "They said it would be temporary. Controlled. They said they had the backups. I told them people would die. I told them chaos would spread faster than order." He looked directly into the camera. "They ran it anyway." Sarah's hand went to her mouth. Tom felt like the floor had shifted under him. The screen changed. Schematics flashed briefly. A bunker. A real one. Not a basement with a generator. A fortress underground. "I can't go there," Richard said. "Not without drawing attention to it." "But you can. You're clean. You're young. You're invisible to the men who will start hunting names." Tom clenched his jaw. "You'll hear people say this collapse was an accident," Richard said. "You'll hear people blame hackers. Enemies. Fate. I want to tell you everything," Richard continued. "But knowing the truth before the world fell would have made you a target. And I won't do that to my son. I helped design the protocol," Richard continued. "I didn't flip the switch, but I built the hand that could. I built the facility you'll access with this tablet," Richard said. "Not as a weapon, as a shield, for people who will need a place to stand when everything else falls." Richard leaned closer to the camera. It was choice. The message ended. The screen went dark. Silence crashed back into the basement. Tom stared at the tablet like it had just rewritten his life. Sarah sat down slowly on the couch. "So," she said quietly, "your dad helped break the world." Tom didn't argue. He couldn't. They didn't go to the facility that day. They didn't pack up and become heroes. They stayed. Because survival wasn't a movie montage. It was a series of small, terrifying decisions. Tom's mother needed him. Sarah needed a place where the lights still came on. And Tom needed time to understand the weight his father had dropped into his hands. Outside, the neighborhood shifted from confusion to fear. By nightfall, someone tried to break into the house across the street. By midnight, someone was screaming 2 blocks away. By morning, the world had learned its first new rule. Power didn't define safety. Preparation did. That night, Tom found Sarah sitting on the basement couch again. She looked up when he approached. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated. "I grew up thinking the world was stable, that things fell apart slowly. Economies, relationships, that kind of thing. She looked at him. I didn't know it could just. Stop. Tom sat beside her. Not touching, but close enough to matter. I didn't know either, he said. She studied him for a long moment. You're not like your father. Tom exhaled. I hope not. Sarah shook her head. Not in the bad ways. In the hard ways. She leaned back against the couch. You always thought I didn't like you, she said suddenly. Tom chuckled softly. You never did much to change my mind. She smiled faintly. Because liking you scared me. He turned to her. What? Sarah stared at the ceiling. Because you always wanted something real, she said. And I never thought I was the kind of person someone wanted for real. The words landed heavy. Tom swallowed. You don't get to decide that alone. Sarah looked at him then, not with challenge. Not with deflection. With something softer. Something new. They sat in silence after that. Not awkward, not tense. Just two people in a world that had gone dark, choosing not to pull away. Above them, the house hummed quietly on borrowed power. Beyond it, the world was beginning to break. And between Tom Bryan and Sarah Mitchell, something slow and fragile had just begun to build on the ruins of everything they thought they understood. Chapter 3, Below the World. By the third day, silence had become a sound. Not the quiet of peace, not the stillness of rest, but the hollow kind that followed something breaking so completely there was nothing left to echo. Tom stood at the living room window just before dawn, watching the street emerge from darkness. No engines, no hum of traffic, no faint glow of porch lights switching off as people left for work that no longer existed. The world wasn't asleep. It was stunned. Across the street, Mrs. Keller stepped out onto her porch wrapped in a blanket she probably didn't need for warmth. She looked toward the Bryans' house and didn't look away when Tom noticed her. That was new. People used to glance at each other out of habit. Now, they looked like they were counting. He stepped back from the window. Behind him, the house was quiet except for the low hum of the generator cycling through its morning pattern. The sound was comfort and danger all at once. Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a mug of instant coffee, hands wrapped around it like it might disappear if she let go. She'd slept on the basement couch again. Tom's mother insisted she take the guest room upstairs, but Sarah said she liked being close to the power source. She liked being close to him. They didn't talk about that yet. They talked about supplies, about neighbors, about what the radio didn't say. People are clocking us, Sarah said quietly when Tom sat across from her. Not just Mrs. Keller. The guy 2 houses down stood outside this morning like he was timing how long our lights were on. Tom nodded. I know. He hadn't slept much. Every noise outside sounded like a decision someone else was making about them. Your dad planned for this, Sarah said. Didn't he? Sarah leaned back in her chair. That's worse. Planning meant intention. Intention meant guilt. Tom's mother moved through the house, pretending normal was a skill that could be mastered with repetition. She wiped already clean counters, folded towels that didn't need folding, hummed songs from years ago. She wanted to believe this was temporary. Tom wished he could too. By noon, the street had changed. Not with violence, with posture. Sarah noticed everything. She always had. Growing up, she'd been the kid who spotted patterns in teachers, moods in rooms, lies and smiles. Tom used to think she was just cynical. Now he understood she was observant. And observant people survived longer. Neighbors stood in doorways instead of porches. Conversations were hushed. Movements were slower. People didn't wave anymore, they watched. They sat in the basement that afternoon, the tablet on the table between them like a third presence. Neither of them had touched it since his father's message. It didn't hum anymore. It waited. You don't have to carry this alone, Sarah said quietly. Tom stared at the concrete floor. Feels like I already am. She leaned forward. Your dad put this on you, not the world. You're allowed to hate that. Tom's jaw tightened. I don't hate him. Sarah nodded. I know. That's the hardest kind of anger. Silence settled again, not awkward, just heavy. Above them, a door slammed somewhere in the neighborhood. A raised voice. Another door. Then nothing. Tom's instincts stirred. We start cutting visibility tonight, he said. No lights after dark except what we absolutely need. Sarah didn't argue. I'll tell your mom. He winced. She's going to hate that. Sarah's lips curved faintly. She already loves me. I can survive the rest. Night came faster now that the world didn't glow. By sunset, the street was a tunnel of shadows. Tom shut down everything but the basement light and one lamp upstairs. His mother protested. I feel like I'm living in a cave, she said. Tom kept his voice gentle. Mom, people notice differences now. We don't want to be a difference. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. She trusted him. That scared him more than anything else. Later, when the house was dark except for the basement bulb, Sarah sat on the couch and pulled her knees up to her chest. I used to think the world fell apart in big ways, she said. Wars, riots, fires. Tom leaned against the wall across from her. Turns out it's quieter than that. She nodded. Scarier too. They listened to the radio again that night. The signal was weak, voices distorted, but the message was clear. Power restoration efforts had failed. Supply chains were collapsing. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Someone on the broadcast said the phrase long-term disruption like it was a polite way of saying this is forever now. Tom shut off. Your dad knew, Sarah said. Tom didn't answer. He didn't need to. The knock came just before midnight. Not loud, not urgent. Careful. 3 taps. Pause. 2 more. Tom and Sarah looked at each other. He moved first, instinct sharp, body ready. He went upstairs silently, peering through the side window by the door. It was Mr. Harris from 2 houses down. He stood on the porch holding a flashlight that barely worked. Tom opened the door just enough. Tom, Mr. Harris said quietly. Sorry to bother you so late. Tom didn't step outside. What's up? Mr. Harris shifted his weight. My wife. Her oxygen machine stopped when the power went out. We've been using backup tanks, but we're running low. Tom's chest tightened. We heard, Mr. Harris continued carefully, that you folks still have power. Sarah had come up behind Tom now. He could feel her presence like a steady hand on his back. Tom glanced at her. She gave his smallest nod. They let Mr. Harris in. Not to the house. To the garage. Tom ran an extension line from the generator, while Sarah helped Mrs. Harris inside to sit near the warmth of the running engine. They didn't advertise it. They didn't invite anyone else. They helped quietly. And for a moment, the world felt human again. When the Harrises left an hour later, thanking them with tears and hand squeezes, Tom closed the garage door slowly. They'll talk, Sarah said. Tom nodded. I know, but he didn't regret it. Not even a little. Later that night, Sarah found Tom sitting on the basement steps, staring at the tablet again. You thinking about the facility, she said. Tom didn't deny it. If this keeps getting worse, I don't know how long we can stay here. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. Not intimate, not distant, balanced. You don't run, she said. That's never been you. Tom let out a breath. Neither is hiding. She tilted her head. Maybe survival is knowing when to do both. They sat in silence. Then Sarah spoke again, softly, carefully. There's something I should tell you. Tom's heart ticked faster. Okay. She stared at the dark wall. I always said I didn't like you growing up. He smiled faintly. You made that very clear. She huffed once. Yeah, because liking you scared me. Tom turned to her. Why? Because you always wanted things to mean something, she said. I grew up learning not to need anyone. You grew up believing people mattered. She glanced at him. That made you dangerous. Tom swallowed. I'm not confused about who I am, Sarah continued. I've always known I love women. That's not changing. Tom nodded. I don't need it to. She met his eyes. What I feel around you isn't attraction. It's trust. And that's harder for me than anything else. Tom's voice was steady. I don't want anything from you except honesty. She smiled faintly. Then you already have more than most people. They didn't touch. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. In the dark, with the world breaking above them, connection didn't need labels. It just needed space to breathe. Sometime after midnight, Tom stood alone at the basement window again, watching the street. A man walked slowly past the house. Not a neighbor. His coat was too clean. His posture too straight. He didn't look at the house directly, which meant he absolutely was. Tom felt something cold settle in his chest. They were being noticed, not just by desperate people, by the kind of people who hunted opportunity in chaos. He turned back toward the basement, toward the generator hum, toward Sarah sitting on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, toward his mother sleeping upstairs, trusting him with her safety, and toward the tablet on the table, not glowing, not speaking, just waiting. By the third day, the world hadn't ended. It had shifted, and Tom Bryan knew one thing with absolute certainty. The hardest part of survival wasn't staying alive. It was deciding who you became while doing it. Chapter 4, Fault Lines. The rain started before dawn. Not the kind that washed things clean, the kind that soaked in slowly and stayed. Tom stood in the doorway of the garage watching it fall, the gray sky pressing low over the neighborhood like a lid. The street looked smaller in rain, narrower. The houses leaned toward each other, no longer separate, just clustered shapes holding secrets. 3 days ago, this had been a place where people argued about parking spots and yard lines. Now it felt like a place where every window hid a question. How long do you have? Sarah stood beside him, hands tucked into the sleeves of an old hoodie she'd borrowed from his mom. It was too big on her, the fabric hanging off her shoulders in a way that made her look younger than she was. Or maybe just more human. They're going to notice the generator again tonight, she said. Tom nodded. I know. We can't keep pretending we're invisible. We're not, Tom replied. We're just not loud. Sarah glanced at him. That only works for so long. The rain hit harder against the pavement, a steady whisper of water and consequence. The argument came before lunch. Tom heard it from the basement, his mother's voice rising, then his own answering back in a tone he didn't like hearing from himself. By the time Sarah reached the top of the stairs, the air in the kitchen was thick with words that hadn't been said kindly. We can't just sit here, Nora Bryan said, hands braced against the counter. People are freezing. They're scared. We have power, Tom. We have warmth. We can help. Tom stood across from her, arms crossed, posture already defensive. We can help quietly. We can't open the house to everyone. Silence dropped between them like something fragile breaking. Sarah stepped in before it could cut deeper. Nora, she said gently, Tom's not saying no to helping. He's saying yes to staying safe. Nora turned to her, pain and confusion mixing in her eyes. I raised him to believe in people. Sarah met her gaze. You raised him to protect people too. Sometimes that means choosing how you help. Nora looked at her son again. And for the first time since the blackout, Tom saw something shift in his mother's face, not defeat, but understanding. She exhaled slowly. I don't want him to become hard. Tom's voice softened. I don't want to become careless. But not the end of the fault line it revealed. Later, when the house had settled into its new quiet rhythm, Sarah found Tom sitting alone in the living room, staring at the rain sliding down the darkened windows. He didn't look at her. I hate that I sound like my dad when I do. She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from him. Your dad made choices for control. Sarah leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Then let me tell you what I see. He finally looked up. I see a man who stayed up all night checking the generator so his mom wouldn't panic. I see someone who walked into the rain yesterday to help a neighbor breathe. I see someone who doesn't like the idea of power but keeps taking responsibility anyway. That's not control. That's courage. Tom swallowed. He looked away again, but the tightness in his chest eased just a little. That evening, the rain turned colder. The house dimmed early. They shut down everything but one lamp upstairs and the basement light below. Shadows filled the corners like they belonged there now. They gathered in the basement, not because it was warm, but because it felt like the center of their world had moved underground. Sarah sat on the couch, knees tucked under her. Tom leaned against the wall across from her, arms folded, eyes distant. The tablet lay on the table between them. They hadn't touched it since his father's message. You ever think about what you'd be doing right now if this hadn't happened? Sarah asked quietly. Tom considered it, probably complaining about traffic, maybe meeting friends for a drink, pretending the world was solid. She smiled faintly. I'd probably be rolling my eyes at couples on social media. He chuckled once. Still might. They shared a small, fragile laugh. Then Sarah's expression changed. I need to tell you something, she said. Tom's posture shifted instantly, alert, attentive. Okay. She stared at the concrete floor for a long moment before looking back up. I've never been confused about who I'm attracted to, she said carefully. I've always known I like women. That hasn't changed. It's not changing. Tom nodded. I don't need it to. She exhaled, relieved. Good. She paused again. But what I feel around you, it's not attraction. It's not romance in the way people expect it to be. It's something quieter. Something I don't have words for yet. Tom waited. She continued. Growing up, I learned not to rely on people. Depending on someone felt like giving them a weapon. Tom's voice was low. And now, she said softly, the world ended and I found myself knocking on your door. The words settled heavy between them. You didn't have to let me in, she added. Tom met her eyes. You didn't have to trust me. She smiled, a real one this time. Guess we're both bad at self-preservation. They didn't move closer. They didn't need to. The space between them felt full instead of empty. Night came without ceremony. The rain faded into a soft mist. The street outside looked like a ghost of itself. Wet pavement reflecting candlelight from inside houses. Faint silhouettes moving behind curtains. Tom stood at the basement window again. That was becoming his habit. Watching, counting, listening. Sarah joined him quietly. You always stand there like you're waiting for something, she said. Tom didn't look away from the glass. I am. For what? For the moment this stops being about survival and starts being about choices. She studied him. What kind of choices? He turned to her then. The kind that change who you become. Sarah leaned against the wall beside him. We're already changing. He nodded. That's what scares me. Outside, footsteps passed on the sidewalk. Not hurried. Not loud. Deliberate. Tom's muscles tensed automatically. They both watched as a man moved past the house, head down, coat buttoned too neatly for a world in collapse. He didn't look at the windows, which meant he didn't need to. He's not from around here, Sarah whispered. Tom shook his head. No. They stayed still until the man disappeared down the street. When the silence returned, Sarah exhaled slowly. People are starting to hunt, she said. Tom nodded. And my dad gave them a reason. Sarah looked at him. He also gave you a choice. Tom glanced at the tablet on the table. Yeah, he said quietly. He did. Later, when the house slept, Tom sat alone on the basement couch, the lamp dimmed to its lowest setting. Sarah appeared in the doorway, hair loose, eyes tired. You okay? She asked. He nodded. Just thinking. She sat beside him, not touching, but close enough that the warmth between them felt intentional. You know, she said, I used to think love was loud. Big gestures. Drama. Fireworks. Tom smiled faintly. Movies taught us that. She nodded. Turns out the real stuff might just be staying when everything tells you to run. Tom's voice was barely above a whisper. You don't owe me that. She turned to him. I'm not staying for you. He frowned slightly. She finished, I'm staying with you. The words landed softly, but they stayed. He reached out then, not to pull her in, not to claim anything, just to rest his hand over hers. She looked down at it, then back up at him, and didn't pull away. They stayed like that for a long moment. Two people in a broken world, choosing not to be broken with it. Above them, rain whispered against the house. Around them, the world shifted again. And beneath it all, something fragile and real took root, not in fire, not in passion, not in declarations, but in quiet loyalty. In the space where fault lines met. Chapter 5. The men who built the fall the radio came alive on the fifth morning. Not with hope, with confirmation. Tom was halfway down the basement stairs when the static shifted into a voice, thin, distorted, but unmistakably human. He froze on the steps, listening as the words cut through the hum of the generator. This is a national emergency broadcast. Multiple grid sectors remain non-operational. Supply chains have failed to recover. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Government continuity measures are now in effect. He reached the bottom and turned up the volume just enough. Sarah was already there, sitting on the couch with her knees drawn up, eyes locked on the radio, like it might say something that would undo everything. Public urge to remain calm. The voice continued. This disruption may extend for months. Sarah let out a sharp laugh that held no humor. They still think calm is a resource. Tom didn't answer, because he already knew what the radio would never say. This wasn't a disruption. It was a new era. By midday, the the truth spread in pieces. People talked in driveways, in hushed clusters near broken cars, in corners of yards where no one could overhear. Someone said the reset had failed. Someone else said it had been hacked. Someone whispered that it was planned. Tom listened to all of it from behind the curtain. And every version of the story sounded like his father's voice saying, it was choice. Sarah stood beside him. People are going to start looking for someone to blame. Tom nodded. They already are. And your dad will be at the top of that list, Tom finished. They stood there in silence, watching the world shift from confusion into something sharper. Anger always came after fear. That afternoon, Tom finally opened the tablet again. Not the message, the map. He sat at the small table in the basement while Sarah leaned against the wall beside him, arms crossed. The screen lit in clean lines and cold geometry. Coordinates, schematics, underground corridors. A facility buried beneath what used to be a decommissioned logistics hub 30 miles away. Your dad didn't just build a bunker, Sarah said quietly. He built an ark. Tom swallowed. For the people who would survive what he helped start. She looked at him. And you're supposed to be the gatekeeper. He didn't argue, because the truth was heavier than denial. They're going to come, Sarah said. Tom's eyes didn't leave the screen. I know. And when they do, Tom closed the tablet. I'll decide who I am, he said. Sarah studied him. You already are. That night, the wind picked up. Not a storm, just enough to make the house creak, enough to remind them that the world still moved even when the systems didn't. Tom lay on the basement couch, staring at the ceiling, the hum of the generator beneath him like a heartbeat he didn't trust. Sarah sat on the floor near the couch, sorting through supplies they'd started organizing into neat rows. You ever think about how weird this is? She asked. Tom turned his head slightly. Which part? All of it, she said. 2 weeks ago, I was arguing with my mom about where I was going to live next year. Now I'm inventorying canned food in a bunker. Tom smiled faintly. Life's got range. She shook her head. I keep thinking, if the world hadn't ended, I'd still be pretending I had everything figured out. Tom's voice was quiet. You don't. She looked at him. Do you? He exhaled. Not even a little. They shared a small, fragile smile. Then Sarah grew serious. You know I'm not staying because of the generator, she said. Tom sat up slowly. I know. I'm not staying because your house is safer, she continued. I'm staying because you're here. Tom felt that familiar tightness in his chest. You don't owe me that, he said again. She met his gaze. Stop saying that. He blinked. What? You keep acting like connection is debt, she said. It's not. It's choice. The word hung between them. Choice. That was the one thing his father had tried to control, and the one thing Tom was determined to protect. Just before midnight, headlights swept across the living room wall. Not the friendly kind. Not neighbors checking on each other. The kind that paused. Tom was on his feet instantly. He motioned Sarah back with one hand and moved to the front window, peering through the side curtain. A black SUV idled at the end of the street. Too clean. Too new. 2 men stood near it, talking quietly. Not desperate. Not confused. Organized. Tom felt the cold certainty settle in his gut. They weren't looking for food. They were looking for information. He stepped back from a window. Sarah read his face immediately. They're here. Not yet, Tom said. But soon. They waited. The SUV rolled slowly forward, then turned onto the next street. Tom exhaled, but he didn't relax. Because hunters didn't rush. They circled. Later that night, when the house slept, Tom sat alone in the basement again. The tablet rested on the table in front of him. He didn't turn it on. He didn't need to. He already knew what it meant. Sarah appeared quietly in the doorway. You're thinking about leaving, she said. Tom looked up. I'm thinking about protecting my mom. And yourself? She asked. Tom hesitated. That comes second. Sarah walked in and sat beside him on the couch, closer than ever before, their shoulders touching. Tom, she said softly, if you go to that facility alone, you're not being brave. You're being alone. He swallowed. I don't want to drag you into this. She turned to face him fully. You're not dragging me. I'm choosing. The word again. Choice. He looked at her, really looked at her. Not the girl he'd argued with growing up. Not the neighbor who never liked him. But the woman who had stayed when she didn't have to. The woman who saw him clearly enough to know he wasn't his father. If this gets worse, Tom said quietly, people will die because of my dad. Sarah shook her head. People will live because of you. The difference mattered. They didn't touch that night. They didn't kiss. They didn't cross any lines. They just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, letting the truth of the world settle into something survivable. Outside, the wind moved through the dark streets. Inside, two people chose not to run for what was coming. By the fifth day, the world wasn't just broken. It was being claimed, and Tom Bryan knew the men who had built the fall were about to meet the people who would decide what came after it.
Thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed.